Welcome everybody, welcome to the channel. This is Phil Beckwith, the professional painter and decorator. Doing a little bit of an unusual one today because you know what I'm like, I'm normally on a job and I'm showing you a little bit of painting, doing a bit of rollering, doing a bit of painting on Doris the door. But on this job, I want to just talk about the paint that I've been using. Now, I get questions and people contacting me asking, what is my go-to paint? And you know I don't like to actually use the word go-to, but I know where they're coming from. They're asking, what is a general, good, all-round paint to use when you're painting your house? So this answer goes out to all the people that have sent me the question to say, Phil, what paint should I use on my house? Now, you've seen the thumbnail, you've seen the title. I'm going to give a big shout out. I don't want to give an endorsement. I'm not sponsored by anybody. I just want to give my feelings about a paint that I've been using on this job. And I'm going through this house top to bottom, only painting either feature walls or actually painting rooms out. I've got no ceilings to do and I've got no woodwork stroke trim. I hate the word trim. So I've been going around this. I've got 3 bedrooms, I've got a staircase, and I've got this lounge stroke dining room, living room area that I've had feature walls and painting walls all the way through, like 4 walls, you know, dead easy. So the paint that I've used Albany, and it's Albany's Durable Matte. Now, Albany is available through Brewers. I think that's the only place you can get it. Yeah, it's the only place you can get it. And you're going to say to me, Phil, why have you gone for this? Why have you gone for this durable? Right, one, price. I've had about 4 different colours on the go. 5 litre tin, and then I've got a 2.5 litre tin. Approximately within a couple of quid, few pence, you're looking about £49, 49, 50 quid for a 5 litre tin. It'll be a little bit cheaper if you've got a trade account, so just see what price you can get on that. But what do I like about this paint? It's an easy paint to apply. It rolls nicely, it cuts in nicely. And when I say cuts in nicely, I've been using cutting in brush, which is the Rembrandt from Arrowworthy. It's the yellow bristle. And cutting in, just get my stuff out, put that down. It's not a microfiber roller, it's, do they call them woven rollers? They're like a fabric woven, and particularly on this dark colour that I've been doing, I have gone round, cut in, and then used a little mini roller just to get the edges around the top, because dark colours are notorious for actually showing picture framing and edges. So I didn't want that, so I've cut in and then I've gone around with a little roller. That's good. But we go back to why I've used this. Go back to why I've used this paint. It's a durable matte, so you've actually got a matte finish. And I'm going to look at this now, look across it. There's very, very little sheen level to that paint. It's a matte finish, it's a durable matte finish. It even says on the side of the can, it says ideal for high traffic areas. It is a class 1 scrub test rating, as far as I'm aware. And also it says on the side of the can, it says up to 500% stronger than just using an ordinary vinyl matte emulsion. I'm going to put the question out there. Why do you need to use an ordinary vinyl matte emulsion when you've got paints like this that's a durable matte, gives you a durable finish, ideal for high traffic areas, that gives you that matte finish without that sheen? And people who probably used Optiva 5, some of the other durable mattes that are probably even modern emulsion. You know, modern emulsion with Farambol, there's probably an element that it is a bit too shiny when you start looking at that 5, 6, 7% sheen level. This is flat. This might be only, correct me if I'm wrong, might only be about a 2% sheen level. But this, I can't fault that as a sheen finish for actually being a matte finish for walls. And you know, I've told you before, if you've got a matte paint, it is less critical on surfaces that are uneven. If you've got bad surfaces, if you're using something like a vinyl silk, a soft sheen, it can highlight the imperfections on walls. So if you go for a matte finish, it does knock that back, if that makes sense. Knocking it back, I mean, actually doesn't highlight any problems that you've got with the surface. And it's really why you use flat paints on ceilings like your AR2s and things like that. But saying that, you could use this on a ceiling. in white. You could use it in any colour if you want, but these are durable paints that you want to consider if you want an easy to apply, good quality finish without going too cheap and without going too expensive. Yes, there are paints out there that are as good, if not better than this, that cost you more. But for the questions that are being asked to me, Phil, what paint should I use? I've got a simple room to paint out. What paint would you advise me to try or use? I would say give it a go. It's probably not something that's been on your radar before because there is a lot of paints out there. But for a price of £50 for a 5 litre can, that's not bad at all. That's quite a good mid-price paint. And what am I getting with it? Well, this wall here, it was already a feature wall. It had got a slight grey colour to it. The question mark is it going to need 1, 2 or 3 coats? Well, clearly the first coat didn't cover. The second coat has gone on fantastic. It's bodied up. It's made for a nice solid finish. But I'm a little bit critical. I can see little areas there that could just do with another coat. So after I've done this video, I'm going to be actually giving this a 3rd coat. And now I don't want everybody going shock horror, shock horror. I knew that this colour that was being picked was going to be 3 coats because I knew the colour that it was going over. It was going to be questionable. It's allowed in the price. I've allowed for 3 coats to go on. So I will be giving it 3 coats because it needs it. And some people are going to say, oh, if I'd used such and such paint, I could get away with 2. That might be the case, but we all know dark colours, greens, reds, blues, are always questionable when we start coming to do them over lighter colours to try and get that opacity coverage, and I'm using the word coverage with the word opacity, to cover in these corners where you might get brush marks, roller, stipple, that you can just see it slightly through it. And that's why I want to give this actually a 3rd coat, and it will be as solid as a rock. So we've allowed for that, that's good. But as a colour, that green has covered really well. Quite impressed. There's a lot of people that actually look at that and go, Phil, it doesn't need another coat. But again, I don't want to say perfectionist, but I am very critical. I am looking for things that the ordinary person probably isn't going to be looking for. And that's why I'm going to be giving it another coat. Now, dark colours. Let's just talk about paints in general. Dark colours can be notorious, particularly these sorts of colours, dark greens, your reds, your blues, even greys. Some greys can be like it. Flocculation, and if you don't know what flocculation is, I'm going to say where were you on that day that we were doing it at college. Flocculation is where your pigments of your paint can be pulled to the surface, mainly when you're using a roller, and the longer power roller you've got, the more it can happen, but it can happen with shorter power rollers as well. If you're actually using a paint with a roller and you've got darker colours, flocculation is pulling the pigments to the surface, and as it dries, you look at the surface and it looks very mottled because dark colour, which is your pigment, seem to be predominant at the surface. It's not an evenly dried finish. It's actually got, I'm going to go over here, it's actually got it's not bad at all. There's not very, I wouldn't say there's really any flocculation there at all. It's quite interesting to see it. It's not actually happened because the pigments, the darker colours in that green would come to the surface. And if I can, let's try and get you focusing on that. Come to the surface and it looks like a mottled finish. That's pretty good. We've not really got anything at all with that. It's not something that the ordinary customer, the ordinary untrained, skilled eye is probably going to be looking for. I look for it because that's one of the telltale signs whether I think a paint's good or not. And this hasn't got it. So when I come back to how good's this paint, I'm going to say give it a go because I think it's really good. Now, another thing I'm going to mention to you is, out of the 4 colours that I've done in here, in this house, there's only 2 colours that I've felt the need that I've put a paint conditioner to it. One of them was on the staircase wall because with this being a new build property, the contract matte or whatever it's been painted in over the last few years was very dry, it was very coarse, it was very rough to touch. So what I've done, I've given them a nice nib down, all the walls have had a nice nib down, and when I came to do the first coat of paint on that wall on the staircase, I felt it pulling, it felt very dry, the surface to actually apply my paint. So I thought it might be worth just putting a bit of, I've used Flow and Bond in one of them, and I've also used the Otwol Flowatrol in another to test them out, and both are very much similar. They're both conditioners, they both helped with the paint application, so I'll give a thumbs up for that for both products. Very good, it helped me immensely. But I'm going to say to you is something we're coming on to, what makes a good paint or not. You've probably seen on TikTok, Instagram and things like that, there's people that put water to paint straight away without even testing it. Now, on most of these rooms in here, I've not needed to thin this paint. That's not needed thinning. It's gone on nicely. These paints can be applied straight out of the tin without thinning. The reason you thin it is if you can't apply it very easily to a surface, because that surface, that substrate is porous, feels dry, it's making it hard work to actually apply the paint. That's when you start putting your paint conditioners in, or even thin it. If you've not got paint conditioners, you probably just put some thinner in it, which these are water-based paints, it's water is your thinner. Thin it when you know you need to thin it. Don't thin it for the sake of thinning it. Try your paint in a place that's probably unobtrusive, that you're not actually going to be seeing. If you do find it a little bit thick and ropey, only thin your paint when you've tried it out. So that's my top tip Tuesday. Thin your paint only when you feel you need to thin it. But there's a couple of rooms in here that I had to add some paint conditioner to thin it down slightly to make it apply easier, to actually get the flow of the brush. I'll try to see if I can do this. Get the flow of the brush, not on this green, I've not done it on this green, but the flow of the brush going round the top. I'm trying to look on the screen to see me doing it, but the flow of the brush round the top to actually get a nice application, that you don't get a build-up of paint, give it a fatty edge, because the paint's too round when it goes onto a dry substrate that's actually pulling all the moisture out of that paint. So that's what I've got to say to you. I'm going to tell you, give it a go. This is a really nice paint. Brewers in Nottingham have not supplied me because I'm not sponsored, but this is where I get the paint from, Brewers in Nottingham. And as a go-to paint, and I'm cringing at the word go-to, as a go-to paint, it's a paint that you probably might need to consider if you just want an easy off-the-shelf paint that can be mixed up in a multitude of colours. They can probably even mix it in some other brands of colour if you want it mixed into a near match, but their range of paint colours is actually very good, that you might not need to look at anybody else's colour card. And on that note, I'm going to say thanks for listening to me on this one. It's not a painting video, it's just a talking about a really nice paint that it's worth considering if you've not tried it before. Right, so this paint can be applied by brush, it can be applied by roller, and you can also use airless sprayers with it. Now, if you are using your airless sprayer, please thin your paint accordingly. It does say on the back of the can that if you're using an airless, can't even say that word, if you're using an airless sprayer, you might want to thin the paint. So please just check with your spray tip that you're using and the paint that you've got, that you probably want to just thin it down slightly because of the substrate you're going over. Now I'm going to put my paint down. Ooh. This tracking's got me. I'm going to poke the finger into that corner. I have got a playlist all about airless spraying, so if you want to know a little bit more about airless spraying, there is a playlist there all about that. But this paint, yeah, there's nothing that you can't really use with it. So brush, roller, airless spray, jobs are good. Another thing to mention is that it does say it can be used over previously painted surfaces and bare surfaces. Now, I'm probably one that's going to say to you, if you have got bare surfaces, please prepare your walls correctly. And I personally would use more of a dedicated bare plaster primer. That said, you can actually thin this down and actually use this as your first coat, i.e. a wash coat on a bare plaster surface. And again, if you're not too familiar with the process of actually painting a room out, what you do is you prime the surface first, then you can do your bits of sanding down, bits of filling up that's needed, And don't forget, if you've got heavy sanding down or areas that have been filled, when you've rubbed them down, it's an idea to actually spot prime them before you start putting your first coat on and then your second coat. And always check your wall in between coats. You might find that you've just missed some little areas that you want some fine surface filler that you want to fill out. And again, if you've got some filler that needs spot priming, make sure you do that before you get to your final coats, or else all you do is get the paint. All you do is get your paint that's actually going to soak into that filler. Some fillers don't flash, and that's the correct terminology for it. Some fillers don't flash as much as other fillers, so please just be mindful of that. It might be a case that you just want to dab a bit of paint over them just to spot prime them before you start coming in with your final coats. So I'm actually going to say to you is, have you tried this paint? If not, why not? If you have tried it, what's your thoughts on it? What did you like about it? What don't you like about it? Because at the moment, I can't really see any negatives about it. The opacity has been really good. The coverage and brushing and rolling, particularly on this sort of green, I'm not seeing roller marks, I'm not seeing brush marks, I'm not seeing anything that would be critical to the trained eye that comes into a room. And you know what I'm like, I do look down across the surface. I do look down across the surface to see if I can see anything that is suspect, like banding or anything like that, and I actually can't see anything. So on that note, I'm going to say to you, please watch the videos at the end. If you've not already done, give us a thumbs up, press the button below, like and subscribe, because the more people I can get liking and subscribing, the more my content can be promoted to other people who are in the same boat as you, probably wanting to know a lot more about painting and decorating. And that's what we want. I want to try and teach the uneducated that there's more to paint than just dipping a brush in and banging it on a wall. So on that note, thank you very much.